Savvy Central Radio, drawing out the best from our guests, with host Christina Nichman.
Wednesday, July 15th, 2015, from 6 to 9 p.m., Savvy Central Radio hosts our fourth live interactive business networking event and interview with our guest, national seminar leader and best-selling author Paul Mlađenović. Paul shares with us his classic program, Zero Cost Marketing. Come join us for a fun-filled evening with fellow entrepreneurs over light fare and cocktails as you build valuable content and knowledge. If you're in the New York City area, get your tickets today and come join us at bit.ly/savvymarketing. Hello everyone and welcome to Savvy Central Radio. This is your host, Christina Nichman. Each week, Savvy runs weekly broadcasts providing entrepreneurs and successful individuals a platform to express their dreams, hopes, lessons learned, expertise, and wisdom with the world. Our guest today is Maura Sweeney. Maura is a happiness empowerment expert, podcaster, international speaker, Huffington Post blogger, and the author of The Art of Happiness. Maura has been curating and conveying stories and ideas that inspire toward a lifestyle and career of living happy inside out. Today, Maura joins us to talk more about her life's journey and how to live to the fullest. To find out more about Maura, visit her website at mauraforyou.com. Hi, Maura. Welcome to Savvy Central Radio. How are you?
I am great, Christine, and thank you so much for inviting me on the show today.
Oh, girl, I am so excited to have you out here. You have such an inspiring story. I can't wait for you to share it. Your current path as a podcaster, author, blogger, and speaker, international speaker. Share with the audience a little bit about your journey and how you came to where you are today.
Well, it's a long one. I will keep it short. But the short part of the journey is that I was brought up in quite a nice way. I was supposed to be a New Jersey lawyer. It sounded great. There was just one problem. I did not envision myself in that role. And so growing up and even going halfway through law school in New Jersey, I realized this is not a path for me. I was really losing touch with myself and also losing that internal desire that, that I always felt that I had, that I'd want to get up every day and go and move forward. And so I left law school midstream to find out who I was and what I was meant to be. So many years have elapsed since then, and now I'm a midlife empty nester. Our daughter is well on her way, and I created a whole new career, which is pretty much, it defines me. I write, I do podcasts, I'm a Huffington Post contributor, and I inspire people to live happily and authentically from the inside out. So I do what I am. I've lived it and I promote it.
I love that. And that recalls for me, Maura, back in my 20s when I was still trying to discover what should I be doing. I had something that started me on a different trajectory, and that was a dream I had where I was on a date and someone said, "What do you do?" And see, in my early 20s, I worked in the mailroom working the copy equipment. And I remember choking on my food in the dream, trying to answer him, going, "Oh, I can't tell him I work in the mailroom doing copies. What is that?" So that left me paralyzed when I woke up going, I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. And how many people can relate at any time of their life going, next 60 years, next 40 years, next 20 years? Wow.
Wow is right. Now look at that. You are thinking that about a mailroom. I was thinking about that functioning as a lawyer.
Yeah.
And to me, it was like being in an empty cell with books. And I'm a people person, and I'm an inspirer, and I enjoy being inspired by others. So everything about that setup as an attorney would not have given me joy. But that's funny to say it happened to you in a dream. Me, I felt like I needed to exit my nightmare and get into a fun dream.
Awesome. And I'm guessing because you created a wonderful book series called Art of Happiness book series. And what kind of propelled you to write that?
Well, it's funny. I think I always used to enjoy writing as a child, but I would write in these small journals and nobody else would ever see them. But a couple of years ago, I found myself lying in bed laughing. And I'm laughing about stories in my life. And I guess I couldn't sleep. I thought, well, let me get up and start to write. Surprisingly, though, the first thing I ever wrote was called Tombstones. And you think, what kind of a thing does this have to do with happiness, writing about tombstones? But and it's a funny, funny piece, but I was writing about our legacies and how we'd like to be remembered. Now, what you wouldn't know is that I'm left-handed, and all of my life I have always thought backwards. So what better way to look at happiness than to look at the end point and work backwards and go toward that goal? And in my case, I discovered I only wanted to be remembered in one way. 2 words: she loved. I really love people, and I love life. And when I started doing my first writing, I thought, that's how I want to be remembered. And then beyond that, I started writing stories like No More Fruitcakes. It was a childhood lesson about not always listening to elder people that think they have the better way to do something. And just these cute little stories. And over time, I started blogging a little bit more and a little more, and realized some of my stories had a theme in them that would really touch the hearts and the minds and lives of other people. For example, in my book series, I write about comfort zones. I write about influences, those who have influenced us in life and what kind of an influence we could be on others. I write about judgment, competition, nonsense. I really wanted to call the book Insanity, but I lightened it by calling it nonsense. So these are things that all of us have to deal with, and I'm a storyteller. So I'll ask people a question, then I'll invite them into my story, and then ask them a question again about that very topic. And when we hear stories, it invites us in to look at our own life stories. And because I really do believe in ultimate benevolence, that no matter what we've gone through in life, we can always pull something good out of it. So that's why I entitle them The Art of Happiness. We can choose to see our lives through positive lenses. And everything, even if it's not great, could always be a wonderful life lesson. And so that's pretty much, the whole idea behind those books.
A number of years ago, I created a blog just for myself back in corporate that was called 101 Mistakes and What I Learned. And yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it never got to 101, but because a lot of the lessons were similar in nature, and it goes to show you that a lot of things that come up in your life, you're really learning the same lesson sometimes until you get it. It keeps coming up. The same things keep showing up for you. But it was a great way for me to see outside when I put it on paper. Oh, well, look what keeps coming up for me, this or that lesson or whatever. But I liked what you mentioned about the tombstone, because I think sometimes if you think about it, if I were going to die today, what would we want people to say about us in the obituary or on our tombstone? What would you want people to remember? And then it helps you to remember, live today the way you want to be remembered.
You're right. And it puts everything in perspective. Suddenly the important things come into focus and all the little things go away.
Absolutely.
And by the way, I need to add something to what you were writing about the 101 mistakes. Now think about this. How many of us and how often do we view our lives in terms of, I shouldn't have done it that way. Oh, that was a mistake. Oh, that was a blunder. But do you see how you ended it and what we can learn from them? We can truly learn life lessons and wisdom and grace and compassion. We can grow so much through what others may consider mistakes if we view our lives through that lens. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. And it's true. It's funny. When I wrote it for myself. And I just put it out there in blog space just because, I just put it out there. And it was funny. Most of my coworkers at the time were like, I love your stories. But heck, I would never share my mistakes in public. But yeah, it's funny because you're thinking, well, we all make these type of mistakes. And when you look at it, we learn from them. That the important thing is that you take what you've done, whatever mistakes you might have made, but learn from them.
Absolutely. And you know something, I think when we are able to share our mistakes and our learning experiences with others, we somehow give others the permission to learn as well. And we give them permission to make mistakes, because sometimes we can't grow without learning the right way, the wrong way, the better way. Yeah. So it's very empowering to other people to hear certain stories of personal growth so that they can say, wait a minute, I could do that too. I'm still alive after a mistake,
That's right. I didn't die. Right. And to realize that the mistakes in themselves it doesn't make you bad. It's like, I think sometimes people don't even want to look at it because they want to be as perfect as possible or be the best person they can. But a mistake is not a bad thing. It's just like, okay, you can be better tomorrow. It's just being one step better tomorrow than you were today.
You're right. And another thing about mistakes, you bring up a very important point, Christina. Oftentimes, especially in our society, mistakes are not viewed as a good thing. We want to be perfect. We have very much the kind of society that admires performance, peak performance. And so therefore, anytime we venture outside into an area maybe that we're uncertain of, we run the risk of failure as we might think it. And so what happens is that we end up living in a very small circle. If we can't excel, then we're not willing to try something. And I think it's important that we do share with others growing opportunities, growth experiences, and as you say, the mistakes along the way to getting into a better place or a bigger place or a grander place.
That reminds me of the book you sent on over about comfort and living beyond your comfort zone. I think what you're just saying is that because you're scared of making a mistake and being perfect, that you don't go beyond your comfort zone. There's that sense of security that if I go beyond my comfort zone, oh, no one's going to like me. They're going to leave me. I'm going to be alone. But in actuality, it's the opposite.
You know what? You are absolutely right. That book, Exiting the Comfort Zone, ended up being the first in my series of The Art of Happiness. It was book 1. And I have to tell you, this might be something for your listeners to hear, and I hope they smile with it. I came, as I mentioned, out of a background where I was trained to be an academic, legal professional, and my career after that went into, the corporate world. Then after that, I was a homeschooling mom. But what happened is that my early training, which was, very cerebral, but not physical. I did not know how to, move my body to music. It kept me in a very tight space. And I didn't start learning how to dance until I was 50. And one of the reasons why I did it was because my daughter called me from school one day and she said, "Mom, they are teaching intro to dance at the local college. Why don't you go? You always wanted to learn." I'm thinking, okay, I'm almost 50. This is crazy. But I didn't want to be a bad example or a bad role model for my daughter, saying, "Oh, you can't do something after a certain age." Well, my story of exiting the comfort zone was the story of learning how to dance at 50. Now, other people may look and think dance is easy. What they don't realize is that every one of us, Christina, has a comfort zone. So what might be comfortable for you might not be comfortable for me, and vice versa. And going from a zone that we've always been in and stepping out of it causes us to deal with our demons. It's I'm going to be embarrassed. I'm going to look like a fool. I'm going to ruin things. Well, I love bringing people through the story of my exiting the comfort zone because it was like a bad episode of I Love Lucy. Fortunately, it had a happy ending, but I'm telling you, think, my God, this lady really had a lot of conviction about learning how to dance. I don't want to spoil it, the story, but I would love to offer it to your listeners as a free gift if they'd like to write to me, Maura at mauraforyou.com, and ask for Exiting the Comfort Zone. People have read my book, and it's a quickie. I mean, you could read it over a nice long cup of coffee or a glass of wine, but people have read that story and said, "Oh my gosh, Maura, I felt so terrible for you. And I thought if this lady could learn how to dance, I could conquer the world." And so this makes me thrilled to be able to share it with other people because my experience of exiting the comfort zone takes you on your own. And then you realize if she could survive it, so can I. And the payoff for it, Christina, is that if we have things in our lives that maybe as young children or as even through adulthood that we really wanted to explore and get a piece of, but we've been afraid to because we might be afraid of being mocked or whatever. My book sort of gives permission to people to say, go ahead and explore, try something. It doesn't have to be exactly as you might have imagined as a child, but there are always ways to bring new possibilities into your life. And it's so empowering, and it definitely in the long run makes you a lot freer and a lot happier.
That is such wonderful points, Maura. And I love that because that recalls for me when I started my own business here. I started what I did in corporate and brought it into my own firm. And thanks to my mentor, I started to exit my own comfort zone and eventually ended up here doing what I'm doing on Savvy. But can I tell you, I was scared to death to talk to any strangers, to get up and present in front of people, and even doing my first broadcast and for several broadcasts thereafter, I was petrified. So, yeah.
Now you brought up probably one. Do you know that's the biggest fear of all is public speaking?
Oh,
Did you know that?
Yeah, I've heard it.
It's greater than death. Now look at that. You could write your own book.
Wow. And it's nuts to know that today I look back and think how many things I was uncomfortable with or out of my comfort zone that now, having done them, I'm still alive. I didn't die. And I have such a fuller life. I've met so many wonderful people. I've learned skills I didn't know I had. And it's possible for anyone, like what you've shown in your book and with your life lived.
Absolutely. Christina, I could not agree with you more because my life has since shifted. And now I take all of what I do and I write about it to encourage others to go and be and follow those things they enjoy in life. I just want to say this back to you. I was so excited when you called to say you wanted me on your show because your show is all about sharing dreams, stories, and lessons learned. Do you realize that if you didn't step out of your comfort zone, that all of the people that are listening to today would never have heard these stories? They would have never learned the lessons. They would have never connected with you, with your guests, and with all of the very empowering and energizing ideas you're conveying as a result of this. So I think that that's very much a universal thing. If we give ourselves permission from the inside to expand and go into our bigger selves, our lives become so enriched. And then we, in turn, end up enriching other people's lives. And here's a very, very big thing. You mentioned at the beginning of this interview how a lot of times we're afraid to get out of our comfort zone. We're very paralyzed because we might make a mistake. But here's the thing. If we become an example of someone who does step out of the comfort zone, who does pursue those things maybe they're interested in or have an affinity for, but maybe a fear, once we do that and we start to acquire that new space, our very presence and being sends out a signal to other people that they too can be free to make a mistake, to step out of their comfort zone, to become their bigger self, and to embrace more of life and to feel more enriched by it. So it goes on and on. It's almost like the gift that keeps on giving.
Absolutely, Maura. Why do you think, from your experience, that many people struggle to find happiness in their lives and exit their comfort zone and just live their greater life?
Well, you know something? I think a lot of people don't exit their comfort zones, and they're probably not even aware of it. The thing that people, I think, most struggle with are their limiting beliefs. A lot of times we are taught life lessons either directly or we acquire them in more subtle ways. I want you to think about this. Think about growing up, the role models we have, the gender models we have, the generational or cultural models we have, economic, religious models. Every one of those things stand in front of us and say, this is not who you are, or this is not something we think you should do. And yet, none of those things that we try to please necessarily reflect back on us and say, way to go, that's really awesome. We're always trying, in a sense, to fit in or to be acceptable within those various models that we see around us. But the problem with that, when I mention things like generational models or cultural models, time changes, circumstances change, and we may still be standing here, but maybe some of those lessons or the models that we had earlier on no longer function for us. So we really need to be able to say, you know what, if I'm carrying old beliefs that are not making me happy or they're not giving me this sense of joy, can I go back and revisit them again? And maybe there's something new I need to discover or find out or shed some light on that will help me what could I say, have a grander life or a grander life experience and a happier one.
I like that point because a lot of times we'll think, and I've talked to friends in the past who are on the verge of like, something's not right in my life, but I'm not willing to look at my beliefs and maybe question them. The idea of questioning them might make the rug from underneath me just slip out. And it's interesting because what you're saying there is that that belief might have worked in your 20s or teens or as a child, but maybe just not working for you right now where you're at in your life.
Exactly. And another thing too, is that I could look at some people who would be my contemporaries. When I was little, 50 was old. It isn't now, it's midlife. Now it's like, you better find out what you're doing next. And so people really do need to rethink, wait a minute, I'm going to be around for a long time. I better figure out what's next. But there are also other things. What happens when maybe you're married and then you find out you're no longer married? What happens when you had a career, but the career went away and your job got downsized or sent overseas? What happens when the skills that you went to school for are no longer marketable? So you see how a lot of these things that function well for us in one era may not work so well in another. But I agree with you. I think a lot of people, they have a worldview that's been created by those views. And to look at them, it can be very frightening because it's, wait a minute, the world changed. What am I going to do? But hey, you're better off looking than not.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking one of the things is we often, myself included, identify with the lives we've created, whether it's being a lawyer or working in corporate or being a mom. We so identify with that particular thing that it becomes our all. Once that part disappears, there's an empty void. And how do you feel it?
You're right. I totally agree. I remember when I was working in corporate America for almost a decade, I saw myself in the confines of my position. And I remember when I left to have my daughter, I was going to be at home with her for several years. I remember thinking, well, this is going to be interesting. I only knew myself, putting on a suit every day and going back and forth to the office. And the same holds true at yet another era. There are women that get so accustomed to being mom. And then before long, their kids grow up. And then they say to themselves, my gosh, what am I going to do now? But you can't keep your children from growing. You need to say, what's next? But those very times when we feel threatened or vulnerable, let's say, because life isn't the same, also present for us an era of tremendous opportunity and possibility. And so that's how I like to see life. And the idea of being able to create avenues of thought for new possibilities, I think it's so empowering. We never know what could come from these new eras.
Yeah, I love possibilities and opportunities because I think when you get to those positions where a void has been filled, not been filled, but have been created due to a new shift in your life, it's the perfect opportunity to start asking questions of where you are today. Where do I stand with my beliefs? Do they work where I am today and where I want to go? And to ask those questions because it can open up a whole bunch of possibilities and opportunities that you wouldn't have expected.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have to say, I feel like I'm one of those people too, because I came out of a very structured background. And now I'm living life very unstructured. And I feel because of that, I'm highly entrepreneurial and I'm always extending the boundaries. And each time I do, it causes me to grow a little more, but I really feel so enlivened and so vital. And I know that if it's true for me, it may not be the exact same set of circumstances because we all have different interests and talents and abilities, but the whole concept works for other people as well. It's a thought process.
And you mentioned earlier being vulnerable. And actually, I think vulnerability can be an awesome gift. When I first started, I started that blog back in corporate before I left corporate. And I got a lot of flack. People loved it, but they were like, you need to take it down. It's too personal. Don't put your mistakes up there. But I found that because even when I ventured to open my first business, people were like, if people see your mistakes, they'll not want to work with you. They won't see you as a credible person to hire. And that's absolutely completely untrue, I found. And why do you think that is?
Wow. Good for you for being such a trailblazer because you're supposed to keep all of your secrets a secret or all of your mistakes a secret. But do you see what that does to all of us? That keeps us separate rather than together.
Yeah.
It keeps us divided, probably frightened too.
Mm-hmm.
And yet when we open up the door and people can see the bigger lessons learned, I think there's, I want to offer something right now that just came to mind. I mentioned that I had worked in corporate America for about a decade. I was in the telecom industry and management. And many of these people I still keep in touch with. But there was someone who wrote to me not too long ago privately, and she said, Maura, I want to thank you for allowing me to be free to make mistakes. Now, the funny thing, I never really thought about it. I remember one day going into a meeting, and I said to everybody, look, I made a mistake a few weeks ago. I set up some new policy. I can't stand it. I am unhappy with it. I don't think anybody else here likes it. I hope you all forgive me. We're going back to the old way. And I was so happy to expose my own error and to ask everybody else's forgiveness. And you know what it did that very day? It set the entire office. I would say, first of all, the tension in the office broke. And it was probably something about some policy that came down from corporate. Who knows? Whatever it was, I didn't like it. But everyone in the office from that point forward knew that if the manager could make mistakes and admit to them, so could they. And I was always very equal in that regard. And here it was so many years later, one of the women saying to me, Maura, thank you for allowing me to make mistakes so that I could grow. So what you were doing with your blog and people were reacting like, oh, how could you do that? Was no different from what I was doing as a manager, opening up to mistakes and judgment that I had made. I never felt myself above mistakes, but apparently it set a very positive working atmosphere for other people as well.
That's a really good point to bring up, because I remember back in corporate and now even in the entrepreneur world, you often hear how you have to come off with your best foot forward. You can't show your insecurities, your vulnerabilities, your mistakes. And way back when I was in corporate, I remember doing that. I had made a huge mistake. It wasn't a policy thing, but I just made a boo-boo. And I told all my superiors above me my mistake, and I apologized. And I remember my other coworkers thinking, well, why would you do that? Put yourself under the bus. I don't know where that bus thing came from. That people use all the time.
They always use that expression.
But I'm thinking to myself, maybe I'm wrong, but I think a good leader is someone that can admit a mistake and then go forward and just fix it. Instead of trying to hide it or say it was someone else's mistake, I think it takes a lot of courage to just say, hey, I made a mistake. Let's go forward. Let's fix it.
See, now I would feel that way too. And here's the other thing. I don't know if people don't realize this, but when somebody makes a mistake and they try to cover over for it, most people recognize the mistake anyway. It becomes the big elephant in the room. So you might as well get it over with and get past it. And I would agree. I think people do. They respect and relate a lot to leaders who own up to their own behaviors, good, bad, and otherwise. It's well, there we go. Apparently, we're both speaking on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. And because the show really does focus on lessons learned, what would you say along your path to finding happiness has been your greatest lesson learned?
Good question. I would say no one can take the path for you. You must choose your own path in life and don't expect somebody else to walk it. You have to take the step. And sometimes, a lot of times we read great stories, we're inspired by other people, we have dreams, but it's not until we take our own foot and start out on that path that we actually become those people on that path of happiness, on that path of self-empowerment, on that path of living happily from our innermost place and seeing how far it'll take us. And I really feel that a lot of times we think everybody else should do it. We could look at other people, oh, they could do this, they could do that. But then we too have our own skills and abilities, and I would even say destinies. And nobody else could take that from us. We must take that path ourselves.
Absolutely. So true. So true. What is your big vision for the coming year?
Such a good question. It's very exciting. It really is. I smile because here I am. I didn't have a background in journalism. Nor did I have a background in ambassadorship, although I would have loved to have been a ambassador going to South America. But anyway, here I am getting ready for a month-long journey where I will be in Serbia and Croatia and Bosnia. I'll be speaking at 4 universities and also at an international human resource leadership conference. And I will be talking about my favorite subject, living your life happily and authentically from the inside out. So most of them will be business people. One of them, I think, is is labor secretary from Finland or something like that. And I have to laugh, Christina, because it's not as if I went to school for this. And yet at the same time, with all of my life experiences, all of my travel to over 50 countries, my desire to be inspired by others and to be an inspirer, it's as if I was planning for this my whole life. So I'm very excited.
Yeah. Yeah, and that just goes back to the beginning of our conversation, that when you push past your comfort zone, ask questions, get vulnerable sometimes, be willing to make those quote-unquote mistakes, that you live your greater life and inspire others and have a kick-butt life.
Yeah, kick butt life. I'll have to remember that as a tagline too.
But girl, before we head on out here, I know that there's still going to be others out there who are on the cusp of struggling to want to get past their comfort zone and live their greater life. What would be your last words to our audience and to those people out there struggling with that?
I would say, do not be afraid. You're a gift to the world, and live your life in Technicolor. Because the world is waiting for you. Honestly, the world is waiting for you to come out and to display all the gifts that you possess and live it out in Technicolor. And I do hope, Christina, that you would put on your show notes the fact that I would love to offer any listener a free copy of my book, Exiting the Comfort Zone, Dance or Die, because they will laugh along with me, they'll celebrate with me, and my real hope is that after reading the story, they will be inspired to go and live their life out of their comfort zone as well and be happier from the inside out.
Woohoo! Yeah. So they can get that at Maura4, that's the number 4u.com, correct?
Right. And go right to me, Maura at mauraforyou.com, or there'll be a place that'll just say contact Maura, and just ask for the free book, Exiting the Comfort Zone, or the dance book, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I read it, guys. It's awesome. And it's so true. We should live in Technicolor because everyone has their God-given talents and gifts, and we're meant to get into the world and live in a bigger way, not to hide it.
Absolutely. And when you live in Technicolor, you help inspire me to live in Technicolor too. So it's the way it works.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Maura. It's been wonderful having you join us today on Savvy Central Radio.
Thank you, Christina.
Wednesday, July 15th, 2015, from 6 to 9 p.m., Savvy Central Radio hosts our 4th live interactive business networking event and interview with our guest, national seminar leader and best-selling author Paul Mlađenović. Paul shares with us his classic program, Zero Cost Marketing. Come join us for a fun-filled evening with fellow entrepreneurs over light fare and cocktails as you build valuable contents and knowledge. If you're in the New York City area, get your tickets today and come join us at bit.ly.com/savvymarketing.